JP Sears is here. He's got dates all over the place. Cincinnati, Ohio's coming up. Huntsville, Alabama. Virginia Beach, Virginia's coming up.
He also wrote a kid's book.
Wrote a kid's book, too. And that is called Chomp Chomp Chomp, the Snapfast Challenge. And you can get that at bravebooks.com.
Actually, I think it's .us.
Oh, .us.
It's even
Very
more
patriotic, yeah.
Yeah, very patriotic. Com is an abbreviation for communism.
Oh,
can't do that.
No.
.us. People.
US.
Okay. Yeah.
America.
And it's about all the TikTok challenges and like the...
Yeah, it's framed in the landscape of social media, make it relatable to kids. And the deeper message is about peer pressure. And it's kind of like, I've got a 3-year-old little boy, and if I could only instill one message in him for the rest of my life, it would be in touch with your own critical thinking, your own heart, and have the courage to follow it. So the book helps portray that because I wanted to bring that same message to families who also want that message.
I like peer pressure. I think... Peer pressure got thrown under the bus with participation trophy. You know, a lot of P's in there, a lot of alliteration. But what I'm saying is participation trophy is fine, and so is peer pressure. It's a two-way street, peer pressure. Peer pressure can be like, smoke this marijuana cigarette and be cool, but could also be, I'm going off to a fucking good college, and so are these other friends, and you're fucking hanging around at a JUCO being a loser.
Yeah.
The peer pressure is... It's a two-way street.
Oh, for sure. Who are your peers? And, you know, the old saying we've heard a million times, you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. So if you've got great peers, peer pressure can be great. Obviously, it up-levels you. You see friends doing amazing things that hopefully can inspire you. But if you've got friends who are, you know, whatever, going to Planned Parenthood to get their, you know, 37th abortion because they get virtue signaling points for it, or they're going to burn the American flag. All right, maybe those peers are something you don't want to take pressure from. But I think, you know, peer pressure, when it's aligned with our own values and our own heart, I agree. I think it can be a good thing.
I'd like to resurrect my theory. I wanted to do some, and maybe AI can do it, or virtual reality or something can do it now, but I wanted to do that show called What the Fuck with John Wayne, where I would just resurrect John Wayne's image in his body and his avatar or something, and I would go, John, you haven't been around for a while. Then I would start explaining to him how we are as a society, as America, and I'd go, we're now at the point where women are bragging about having abortions. John Wayne would be like, what the fuck, you bragging? What do you mean? We told your priest, maybe. They're like, no, they're on TV.
Yeah.
His head would explode.
And, man, I think about that all the time. My grandfather, on my dad's side, he died, 15 years ago. And I just think, how tripped out would he be to, like, you know, whatever, resurrect now, or he was in a coma, and you fill him in like, yeah, Grandpa, the #1 female swimmer in the country is a man.
Yeah.
Women are bragging about abortions, and we're using racist tactics to combat racism. And, you know, he was probably racist himself. So he's like, well, those are good ideas. That's
right.
Racism. It's like, no, they're trying to do the opposite with that.
Yeah, it is. They would be, and it's funny because, you know, I oftentimes think, you know, you imagine talking to someone from the 50s about this, but you really would only have to go back to 2007 to talk to someone about where we're at now and freak them the fuck out.
Yeah, I think that's true. When did the whole LGBTQRS fucking two-spirit thing, when did you first hear about that? For me, I want to say like 2016, maybe?
Well, probably. I grew up with a Dumbo hippie mom who floated a lot of these farts, you know, in the 70s. So I was kind of a battle-hardened veteran of retarded ideas by the time I was 20, you know, because I got the first wave of this shit. The first wave of it started in the 60s and the early 70s. So it's been around for a long time. So by the time we got to the 2.0 reboot of retarded ideas that made no sense, they changed their names a little bit. You know, my mom wasn't talking about defunding the police, and she wasn't talking about global warming. She was talking about the ice age that was coming. So she wasn't talking about the polar caps melting. She was talking about us living in an ice age. And we talked about the ozone. We don't really talk about the ozone anymore. But it was a different packaging of the same fucked up, stupid, unprovable, never going to happen ideas. But they still clung to them. I mean, one of my moms, well, not just my mom, but anybody was fucking... the grandparents of the fucking idiots you're laughing about now, that was my mom. Okay? So, and there was a whole group of them. And they're very much into the whole gender thing. They're very much into... It's all a societal pressure thing. It's all about society conditioning young girls to wear a dress and young boys to play with pop guns and army soldiers and young girls playing with dollies. And that was foisted upon them because that's the society we created. Same non-logical, semi-retarded ideas, but it's packaged differently now.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Like, I think one of the earlier ones that I can think of is you can't call midgets midgets. They're little people. And that was, I think this same pattern of something is true. It has a word with an objective meaning, but you can't say that word. So we have to create a new term, little people, which means the same fucking thing. And also in 2 years, little people will realize, oh, that's a midget. So then you got to create a third term.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you why we have to do that. And yes, you can't break it down logically, little person, which is much more demeaning than whatever title you would have. Because you would say about somebody who you worked with who was very petty, such a little man. He could be 6'3", but such a little man. He's a little, I'll crush you, little man. Like
it's almost like the virtue signaling language doesn't work.
Well, it's oftentimes more demeaning. Like server feels worse than waiter or waitress because 100%. Server is like real close to servant.
Yeah, but go clean the bottom of my fucking toilet lid.
Right.
So give me a hot dog at Carney's.
Yeah. And little person, look, okay, so it's a few things in terms of unwrapping that one. The idea, and so you have to know the big picture with the LGBT2 spirit, whatever, or the little person, or here's what you can say or what you can't say. I mean, the most insane one to me, and then I'll underscore what I'm getting at here, is you cannot say colored person, but you can say person of color, which
like the same syllables.
I've said on stage. It's like saying you can't say you're a Raiders fan, but you can't say you're a fan of the Raiders. It's the exact same thing.
It is.
It makes no sense. Now you go, why? Well, what's with all the rules? What's with all the rules? The rules aren't there because they care about black people or dwarfs. The rules are there to fuck you up, to trip you up, and to correct you. And this is part of academia. And this is another thing I learned because I got a front row seat to this because I had a hippie mom who was perfect. She was like the poster child. Never worked a day in her life, took welfare and food stamps, never contributed financially to anybody, and then would sit around talking about rich people not paying their fair share. That's all she did was take shit from people, live in a free house, never pay into the system, and then complain about the people who were keeping the lights on not paying enough.
Was your mom's name AOC?
Yes.
Was it?
She was.
She's a beautiful bartender, that lady.
She's a great bartender. And so I got to see that with my mom, and then something I got to see with my grandmother, who was a sort of pseudo-intellectual, spent a little time in the Communist Party and hung out with academics. She loved academics. They have I'll tell you what I've learned. They have an unyielding love for all academics. You know, they would always go like, Emory Kenrick has an advanced degree from Stanford. And, you know, and it was always, they loved academics. And my grandmother loved correcting your language. She was a constant language corrector. If you said, one time I said solenoid, she told me it was solenoid. One time I said labia. She said like labia or something. I literally
talking about labias with your grandmother.
I got into an argument with her over clitoris versus clitoris.
It's already weird.
Fucking big argument.
At the dinner table, right?
Yeah.
Well, that argument carried throughout the house because we had to get up and go find Grandpa's oversized font dictionary because he had same problem. And he popped it over, and she would say, her friend Gene Stern is a physician, and she says clitoris, and I would go, well, Dr. Drew's a physician.
We did defund the grammar police.
Yeah, she once was explaining to me that it wasn't pronounced hors d'oeuvre, it was pronounced hors d'oeuvre.
That's wrong, right?
Okay, let me tell you what I would say to that bitch. I would go, look, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying if everyone says hors d'oeuvre, then I'm not going to a fucking party and asking where the hors d'oeuvres are because then everyone will think I'm an asshole. So I'm just going to say clitoris and hors d'oeuvre at the same party.
Yeah.
And not too far apart. And that's the way I roll. But it was weird. And so what she would do is you would have like an argument with her, and then she would correct you on some mispronunciation you made. And then you would lose your train of thought with the argument, and you would assume a defensive posture now. Like, what'd I say?
That's
What'd I
good,
say? Did I miss
tactic of grandma, by the way.
It's perfect. It's perfect. I believe there's a lot of that in the black community. Like, let's give our kids names no one can pronounce. And then when you're arguing with them, we can stop and talk about the pronunciation of their name. So there's a lot of that. So the left and academia want to control language, not really the outcomes or the numbers or what's going on. So they're constantly correcting. And before you know it, you're not really talking about the subject anymore. You're talking about the language that you're using in the process of the discussion, which they don't want to get to because they lose that argument.
That makes sense. Classic diversion. It's kind of like, hey, there's this Ukraine bribery scandal with Biden, but look at these UFOs over here. Let's talk about this.
Yes.
By the way,
well, no, you go... Here's how it would work with if my grandma was alive. I'd go, Ukraine. Then she'd go, I stand with Ukraine. For some reason, all the leftists become warmongers now. Because I stand with
fucking love war.
Ukraine. And I'd go, you didn't hear about Biden's taking all that money out of Kiev? And she'd go, it's pronounced Kiev. And I'd go, I thought it was Kiev. No, it's Kiev. She said, I always heard the news people saying Kiev. Well, it's not. And now we're off Biden.
Yeah.
And we're on how to pronounce Kiev.
Yeah. My wife does a similar pattern, not with language, but it fucking makes her win every argument.
Right.
Which, back to point you already made, not that I could ever win an argument.
No, you left the sunroof open.
Yeah, 100%. When you did that, it was my fault, babe. Sorry. Is it supposed to be clitoris?
Well, now Dawson or somebody can look it up, Byron. I don't know.
When
Chris can look it up. Now, when we went to my grandfather's oversized dictionary in 1998, when we were having this very heated clitoris versus clitoris argument, and she fucking stood her ground, and I always said clitoris, and she swore it was clitoris. When we got to the dictionary in my grandfather's office and looked... What percentage of Americans as an adult have stood in front of a dictionary and looked up clitoris with their grandmother?
I'd say
is it nobody?
Probably less
than 0.1%.
I was going to say less than 7 people ever.
It's sort of like when you make up a word sometimes. You go, has that word ever been uttered? And then there's a part of you that goes, well, somebody. Like, there must be some scenario where somebody was looking up clitoris or clitoris with their grandmother, but
Not often. It doesn't happen as often as you'd think.
No.
I've been saying clitoris ever since I think I was like 17. I said clitoris in front of friends, and they just roasted me for it. I'm like, well, that feels emotionally painful, so I guess it's clitoris. Which, by the way, clitoris.
Yeah,
That's-
so
all right.
it is clitoris, but clitoris is listed as an alternate
We
pronunciation.
had the
Clitoris.
ultimate like Mexican standoff by the dictionary because I was like, clitoris, you know, and she's like, I'm swimming in clits now. I can't even figure out which one's right
I just
anymore.
love your
But
neighbors just hearing you guys yell at each other.
she was like, it's clitoris. And it said, like, you can do it either way. You can pronounce it either way. And my grandma like folded her arms, was like, and stormed out of the room. You know?
Say
Dictionary's
potato, I
Yeah.
say clitoris.
Which
That's right.
Yeah, I think the clitoris is
Clitoris.
just a conspiracy theory. I've never been able to find the fucking thing. So
Yeah, no, I
I'm very
don't even-
skeptical of it.
That was a whole secondary argument I had with Nana that just kept going.
Nana,
So-
it's clitoris.
But I realized she was kind of a lefty communist. She loved academia and she loved picking on words and correcting you. So now, fast forward, you have to think about the 30-year-old version of that bitch just picking on every. It's not the you can't say bi or you can't say tranny or you can't. Why do they have so many rules of telling you what to say? And why do they change so often? And then, as you brought up, what the fuck is the difference between a dwarf, a midget, and a little person?
Yeah.
Little person is not a step toward the light. So, obviously, they're up to something, and that something is control. And then when you hear them talk, they throw in little weird things. Like they say things like full stop. You know, they go like, I stand with Ukraine. Full stop.
stop.
It's like, you stopped.
Wow.
If you stop, like when you stop at a stoplight, you don't have to roll down the window and yell full stop.
Yeah, I must declare that I
We
stopped.
saw that you stopped. That's what periods are for. And then if they adapt little things. Like if you hear like the press secretary of Jean-Claude Van Damme or whatever. Jean-Claude damn lesbian. She's up there and they'll go, Peter Ducey will be from Fox. He'll say
Right.
like, oh, what about Joe Biden and Hunter and all their joint offshore accounts? And she'll go, I'm not going to address that from here. I don't know why you have to put from here. It's not later on over a beer. I'll fucking tell you everything you want to know.
Implying, of course, I'll answer that question, but not right now.
Not
gonna step
from
off.
here.
Yeah.
Not from here. Well, this is the only here there is, bitch. It's a press.
You should
You're
be
the
doing it
fucking
from there.
dais, and they're in the crowd. You don't get together socially and get to ask off the record questions. But she'll say from here, and then he'll go. A lot of there's now emails and texts out there that suggest Hunter got a sports car and a diamond from the wife of Russia, and she'll go, I'm not going to get into that from here. Now, I'm not going to get into that means you're dodging the question. But if you button it up with from here, now somehow it's a tie. You know what I mean? Like,
I guarantee,
Full stop. Not from here.
guarantee she's using that very consciously as a deliberate manipulative tactic. And I think whether it's Nana or Jean-Pierre Van Damme or any of the other thought police running around with blue hair, that's authoritarianism when they're correcting language. And I think that tells you what they're willing to accept. If they're acting like little authoritarians, to me, that suggests, they're very programmed to accept authoritarianism, which means they're going to be very controllable. They're going to welcome in, hey, totalitarian regime, come on in. I know you're here to protect us. Okay. And then they do their little authoritarianism shit.
I agree. I think COVID was a wake-up call. It was a wake-up call. You can find that from here clip. It's probably the last exchange Peter Ducey had with her. She said from here twice, which I love. I love the unnecessary words because you think they're unnecessary, but they're not unnecessary.
With
Right.
what she's trying to accomplish.
What she's trying to accomplish. Essentially, COVID was like a Brinks truck. Every once in a while, you'll hear some story about some 18-wheeler filled with Beanie Babies burst open on the highway, and there are Beanie Babies strewn all about, right? And if you live in a decent society, then there'll be a lot of footage of passersby helping them collect the beaner baby from El Salvador. So the Beanie Babies, and help the guy load them back in the truck. But if you see a bunch of people grabbing the Beanie Babies and throwing them in their own cars and fighting other people for the Beanie Babies or cash,
Sure,
or frozen chicken or whatever it is, then you get a little glimpse into who that society actually is.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And COVID gave me a little glimpse into what, for instance, Gavin Newsome was all about. Because his first impulse was to lock you down, shut you down, and fuck your shit up. That was his first thing, was to seize control. There was an opportunity, like the jackknife Beanie Baby truck. There was an opportunity, and he fucking dove on it. And he was closing beaches and bulldozing skate parks with sand and taking the nets off the beach volleyball courts and welding rebar over the hoops, of the parks and shutting every school. And then it's like, oh, he gets to do what he wants to do. This is him. This is what's in him. This is his impulse. And this happened a lot, and then you got to see who these people were, which is, oh, you like authority a lot.
Yeah, it's just like how they say, whoever they are, money and fame doesn't change you. It just magnifies who you already are. And I think your point about COVID, that was a big magnifying glass. You got to see who Ron DeSantis is, what he stands for, Gavin Newsome, who he is, and what he stands for. It's pretty interesting.
When did you leave California?
I left California in 2014.
Okay, so it's
Bigger.
you're early.
Now, then the bigger question is not what does Gavin Newsome stand for? What the fuck happened to all the rest of the sheep who support him and dutifully went along with his insane decrees? That's the scary part. The scary part isn't that there's a Gavin Newsome. Those guys are on every corner. The scary part is the citizens who did his bidding and were weaponized and deputized to do what he told them to do.
Absolutely. The magnifying glass showed you what level of obedience or sovereignty people have. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you've probably heard, I think Alex Jones originally broke the story a month ago, lockdowns are allegedly coming back in December. Who knows if that's true, but if it is, I don't want it to happen, but part of me kind of does, just because, I'd like to see the barometer. Where are we at now? Because obviously 2020 obedience was shockingly high.
Shockingly.
And I think a lot of people have woken up over the past 3 years. It took some people a while. But I would just be surprised if there's even half as much obedience. And of course, if it was just as much obedience, if not more, then I'd be depressed for a while.
I think there'd be less from a percentage standpoint obedience, but there'd still be an alarmingly large amount of people who obeyed, and you would be disappointed. You're going to be disappointed. Is all I'm saying.
Be disappointed.
All right, any doozy out there talking to JPL or?
We're going through press conferences, just trying to find her to say I'm not going to address that from here.
She's talking to the blonde guy.
It exists.
And she's up there, yeah.
You're misinitialing her, which
I know
feels like a microaggression. This
KJP
is definitely not in a safe space.
KJP.
I think I have. I'll send it.
You're probably also gingerphobic.
Oh, I got a little of that, yeah.
Which, by the way, when Nicole welcomed me into the studio, her having red hair, that made me feel very included.
We hired her just for
why she's only here.
I figured.
She's only here for today.
Well, thank you for catering to my special needs of red hair and whatever defective gene I have.
Do we have that?
Still looking.
Oh, okay.
Oh, Byron, check your G-chat, too.
Yeah. You have to always listen for the little things. Listen for the tweaks.
Language is powerful.
Well, it's powerful, but it's not. It shows your motivation. So you have to listen to. I've never, ever, ever spoken to my son about his business ever. To I'm not in business with my son. Well, that changed.
Yeah.
How did that change? To I've never directly profited from my son. Well, why is this changing?
Yeah.
If you've never, if somebody said to me, have you ever fucked the chupacabra? I'd go, never. But 9 months from now, I wouldn't go, I've not laid down full time with a chupacabra, if that's what you're asking. I would just go, I've never fucked a chupacabra, and I'm never going to change my story.
I've never had sexual relations with a chupacabra.
Right. That wasn't consensual.
Yeah.
Right. Now, well, your story's changing now. And when the story starts being modified with just little bits and words, oh, maybe this is it. Then
there's a few of them, actually. Byron, check the last one I sent you, too, but she says it a lot.
That anybody in the country is talking about at this exact moment while we were in here is Trump. And they look here to find out what the White House thinks about it. And
well, I think the American people should feel reassured that when there is an ongoing case like this one, that we're just not commenting.
And so, does the lack of comment mean that you do not think anything happening in New York today is one of the top issues facing the country at the moment?
That's your assessment. That's not my assessment. I'm just laying out the facts that we are just not going to comment on an ongoing case from here. And we've been very consistent. We've been very prudent, and we're going to stick there.
What do you think runs through her mind and what she feels the second before Peter Ducey asks a question?
I feel like you drank 4.5 beers and you lived really close to the Chili's and you're like, I'm fucking driving back, and you see rollers in your fucking rear view and you're like,
You gotta be kidding me.
I drank 4.5 beers. Like, I don't know if that means I'm getting arrested, but fuck.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, we got one more.
Oh, yeah, she says a lot.
Okay.
This testimony, since the last time that I was in here, Devin Archer talks about how he and Hunter Biden tried to profit off the Biden brand. What is the Biden brand?
Not going to get into it from here. I'm not going to get into it from here. We're going to move on. Go ahead.
Wow.
All right. Well, that's what you want in a press secretary. Someone won't get in from here, but later when they move to another outdoor location, or perhaps convene by the pool or the Rose Garden,
a more carbon neutral place. We'll get into it. From there.
Then, but not from here.
No,
not with you, reporter, and me, press secretary. Yeah. Not now. That's later.
That's more of a their question. Not
it's more of a like we're on a
question.
Southwest flight. And we've had a couple of drinks kind of question. But not from here.
Yeah.
Not from here. You're not going to do it from here.
I'm curious, Adam, not to hijack your show, but thank you for being on. Pleasure to have you in studio.
Sure.
RFK Jr. just announced today he's running as an independent. Curious your thoughts on that whole thing.
I like that guy. He's been in here before. He's a serious intellect. He's a serious man, a serious thinker. Comes with a little bit of baggage, but at this point, just someone who's a serious thinker, I'm down with.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, out of time, JP Sears, but Chomp Chomp Chomp, the Snapfast Challenge is the book. You can purchase it at bravebooks.us. U.S.
Yeah.
Not USA.
Implied.
Yeah, and live dates coming up all over the place in the YouTube channel, Awaken with JP, and JP Reacts as well. Follow this man. He's always funny.